Happy to see everyone again. And those who were not here last few times, I'm happy to greet you. At any rate, the shiurim for today's have been dedicated by and sponsored by Dov Warner, and he does so in appreciation of the Torah tidbits, which we all appreciate. So how nice that is. And I greet you again. Now I think that you've already. Okay, now. I have a little problem here. Um, and that is there any way that I can, right now on my screen, all I see is that. And I see myself, is there any way of making this, I suppose I can just put stop share and then just put it on when I need it. It's easier for me because I'd rather have the ability to see everybody. But at any rate, I think it's time for us to get started, correct?
Yes. We're recording already.
Very good.
Okay.
The parsha this week, of course, is Vayechi, which closes the book of Shemot, and how fitting it is. There are many reasons for that. Thank you. It begins right before we begin Sefer Shemot. It's the closing of Sefer Bereshit with the Parsha of Vayechi. There are many reasons that one can see why this was a logical ending, and not the least of which is the fact that you have the story of Yosef and the brothers coming to a real full stop and ending a reunion of the family. And even last week, when we read primarily the story of the reunion, we did not quite get to the end. In Vayechi, we see with the death of Yaakov, there was still some fear about from the brothers that perhaps Yosef would then take revenge, and the reassurance that Yosef gives in this week's Parsha puts a clear ending to the story and a complete, wonderful, actually, reunion, and once again, an attachment of the brothers to Yosef. And once the family has been healed, and once it is together, and now it's time in next week's Parsha of Shemot to start the story of Am B'nai Yisrael. For the first time, the descendants of Yaakov are called an Am, a nation, and that's next week's Parsha. But before we say goodbye to Yosef and his brothers, I have chosen to take a rather different approach, perhaps a fresh view of the well-known, perhaps the best-known story in all of Tanakh, certainly in the Torah. It might be considered the best-known story in the biblical history. If I can put that grand connection to it. But I will tell you that we have, from the time we were young, we've been educated with a specific view of the story. We all know the story. We know it well. I've been discussing it in the last few weeks regarding the mission of the brothers to Yosef to Egypt. And it's a traditional view. I'm a traditional guy. But I want to show you what the text says about the story. Now, you might have heard some of this, and maybe you have not. But I think the approach, especially for those of you who have not yet heard this, may open up worlds for you in understanding not the story perhaps as it was taught to us when we were so young, but rather the story of Yosef and the brothers as the Torah tells us, what the text says, and perhaps you will be surprised. It is, I hate to say it, a new approach. It's actually the oldest approach. Much of what we have about the story is from our traditional views of Chazal, and why they say what they say. They had a reason for it, but it does not agree. Can I use that term? Doesn't quite jive with the text itself from the Torah itself. So I want to look then simply to the story as the Torah sees it. And I think you'll find that we get to solve some of the problems and difficulties we may have in the text, in the story that we've learned for so many years. I'm not being a radical here. This is an approach that is taken from many Parshanim, Chizkuni and the Rashbam and others, but it's really very basic. It is a story as the Torah tells it. And so for the next 45 minutes, I hope to be able to open up this other view of the story. I feel even more comfortable with it, and I think this is closer to the real story as the Torah tells it. And I think that if I don't change your understanding, at least I'll help you convince you that there's a different way of viewing all of the events that occurred maybe 3,500 years ago and actually shaped our very history. So let me begin with a simple thing that I touched upon actually last week too. Shlomo HaMelech tells us in Mishlei Rabot Machashavot B'Lev Ish V'Atzat Hashem Hitakum. We all have, a man has many plans and many ideas, but in the end, it's God's plan that always works out. And that's the idea when we were balancing last week, the concept of man's actions and God's destiny and what he does. Rashi says much about this approach when discussing in the beginning of the story of Yosef. That basically he says that the brothers and Yosef, everybody was doing what human beings do, making their plans and ideas, but in the end, what they were doing was carrying out God's agenda. And if I touch for a second here in the screen, and we go to what I just had, and suddenly got, here it is. You'll see, you'll see in Rashi number 2, and I purposely translated as well, when it says that Yaakov sent Yosef from Hebron, from actually Emek Hebron, and Rashi says, but Hebron is not in a valley, it's on a hill. However, he says it means from the deep counsel of the righteous one, from the deep counsel of Abraham, who was buried in Hebron. The idea is that the story is in effect fulfillment of that which was told to Abraham, your descendants will be foreigners in another land. Simply put, it was very interesting, and Rashi says it very, very clearly. Rashi says, no, he says, I'll just see this there. Rashi says that the whole story of Yaakov sending Yosef to see the brothers was really part of God's plan to get all of Israel down to Egypt, as he had promised Abraham, that that your descendants will be enslaved in another country. At any rate, the entire Yosef saga, I put it that way, was a ploy to bring the people, the family of Israel to Egypt. Does that mean we relieve all of the misdeeds of the brothers as saying, it's okay, God did it? No, they didn't make their own decisions. But I want to uncover in this shiur crucial parts of the text that will change perhaps your view of exactly what happened. And we'll start very simply. We start in the Torah, where it says that Yosef approached the brothers as he was looking for them, and when they see him from afar, you all know the story. They plotted against him to kill him. Actually, and they said, here comes the dreamer."
No. Oh, they will them be.
Right? They said exactly. Let's throw him into a pit. We'll kill him and throw him into a pit. The plan was they were going to throw him into a pit. They weren't going to kill him, but they figured, we'll go into a pit and he'll die there. That's all. We won't have killed him per se. We will have caused his death. But, we didn't officially kill him. And we'll say, and we'll assume that he was probably eaten by a wild animal. And when Reuven hears this, he decides he's going to save Yosef from this plan. And he said, "Lo nakenu nafet." No, we shouldn't make him die, so that he'll be killed by we'll throw him in the pit and see to it that he'll get killed. You know what? We'll just throw him in the pit. He says, "Hashlicha oto abar hazeh." Why don't you throw him not into a faraway, into a pit that's nearby over here? Biyad al tishlechu bo, but don't you really harm him directly? And as the Torah says, it was Reuven's plan in order to save him. Very nice. Okay, he convinces them not to murder Yosef with their own hands, but rather to just throw him into a nearby pit so that he could go over and save them. Something he didn't tell the brothers, of course. Well, they agree, and in order to carry out Reuven's plan, it says there that when Yosef approached them, they grab him and they strip off his kutonet pasim, that expensive cloak he's wearing that caused so much resentment, and they throw him into a pit that had no water. And then they sat down, and they sat down to have lunch, and they saw from afar there was an orachat Ishmaelim. There was a caravan of Ishmaelim. What were they doing? They were Ba'a mi Gilad. They were coming from the east, from Gilad, the northeast, and Gilad, and they were carrying, because they were traders with a D, Gmalim nosim nachot tzri valot. They were bringing spices, holchim lo rid Mitzrayma, to bring it down to Egypt. As I pointed out last week, they were bringing it to Egypt. They were international traders coming from the east, the north, going down through Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz Canaan, down to Egypt, and there they would sell the spices. And so Yehuda has a brilliant idea. He feels rather guilty, it would seem, that possibly have Yosef killed. So he said, "Ma betza," he said, "of what profit will we have if we just kill him? Better we should sell him to the Yishmaelim without harming him. After all, he is our brother." And they listened to him. And that's, of course, what they do. Now comes the crucial thing, and I want to perhaps share the text with you here. Very important now. And so, please see this text here. Look at this in the second Vayavru. After they make this decision, as I just read to you, what profit is it if we slay our brother and cancel his blood, says Yehuda. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelim and not lay our hand against him. He's our brother. And they agreed. Now, and that's in the 27th Pasuk. 27th, I think, okay? And there, the very next verse. Vayaru anashim midyanim socharim. While they were waiting for the Ishmaelites to come, and then they would take Yosef out of the pit to sell him, unbeknownst to them, while they were eating, from behind them came a traveling traders who were not international traders, but local traders. They were merchants, Midyanim, the Midyanim. Vayamshichu, and they came, Vayalu at Yosef min habor. And they took Yosef out of the pit, Vayimkeru at Yosef Vayishmaelim, and sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim for 20 kesef, Vayaviu at Yosef Mitzrayim, and brought him to Egypt. And I'm going to pause here, for I have you to look at this very clearly, and I underlined it. See that the Midianite merchants passed by. They drew Yosef out of the pit. Who drew Yosef out of the pit? When it says they, that pronoun was referring to whom? Was it referring to the brothers? Do you see the brothers even mentioned in this verse at all? Who is mentioned? Who is the noun here to which the pronoun revisions? The Midianite merchants. The Midianites drew Yosef out of the pit. The Midianites, they sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim. And they, the Ishmaelim now, who are not, brought Yosef into Egypt. Now, how do Chazal, the story that we've learned for so long, how do they see these verses? They take the brothers who are not even mentioned here, they're mentioned in the last verse, and they said that they took Yosef out of that the brothers took Yosef out of the pit. The brothers sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim, and who brought him down to Egypt. Now, there's clearly a problem here, not only because the ha'ikar is chasem and hasefer. You're missing the word the brothers here. You're throwing that in when they're not here. Beyond that, there's another problem. If this is what really happened, that the Egyptians took him out of the brothers took Yosef out of the pit, would it not have been very simply logical to say they sat and they saw the Ishmaelim and they went by Imshachu and they took Yosef out of the pit? This little thing, Vayaru anashim, and Midianite merchants passed by. Of what import is that word? Are those words? Who cares that they happen to pass by? If it is the brothers who came and took Yosef out of the pit and the brothers who sold him to the Ishmaelim, then that would have been a perfect continuation from the last verse, where the brothers saw the Ishmaelim, so they went and took him out of the pit. But the Torah purposely puts down Midianite merchants passed by, because the Torah is telling you it isn't the brothers who took Yosef out of the pit. It was the Midianites. And if that's the case, we now understand the rest of it, the rest of the story which now says Reuven goes back to the pit. Why does Reuven go back to the pit? Reuven goes back to the pit because he's trying now to save Yosef from the plan that the brothers had. Yes, the brothers were going to take Yosef out, and they were going to sell him to the Ishmaelim. Totally logical. But the Ishmaelites were, and it's in the international trade route, which was going down closer to the west, to the from the ocean, the Mediterranean. They were up in the Dotan, or near Shechem, and they looked down because Shechem is up high, and they saw that and knew it's going to take a while for the caravan to reach them. While they were waiting and eating, that's when the Midianim came. And they're the ones who took him out of the pit. I know, I'm going crazy. Come on, Rabbi Winkler, we had a couple of thousand years of telling this story very differently. Yeah, I know, but the Torah tells it differently too. And I'll tell you why it's so much more logical. What happens when Reuven comes to the pit He says, Yosef enenu. Yosef isn't in the pit anymore. And he cries out. And he goes back to the brothers. He says, Yosef enenu v'ani ana ani ba. What am I going to do? I'm the eldest. Yosef isn't there. Now, what did we learn? Why, if the brothers sold Yosef, what's Reuven doing? Hey, how come Yosef isn't here? So what did we all learn? Oh, well, you see, that was the day that Reuven had gone back to Yaakov back in Hebron, and he wasn't there when they did that. It's a lovely story. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Did you ever walk from Shechem to Hebron? Do you think it's a half hour? It would take days and days. So Reuven said, I'm going to save Yosef. I'll take him out of the pit. But first, I'll take about a week to go down and worry about my father. And then I'll come back up. And by that time, well, a week without water, he'll be okay. But it made no sense. What made also no sense is, now if indeed, as Chazal tell us, every day we had a different person went and tended to the father. Well, if that's the case, if they were always going there, why was Yaakov said, go and see how my sons are doing over there with the sheep? He had people coming and informing on him every single day, coming to all the brothers. One of the brothers were coming. Why did he need Yosef to go there to see how they're doing? It doesn't make sense. What does make sense? When Reuven comes and cries and says, Yosef enenu, Yosef is missing. What am I going to do? You'll notice, nowhere in the Torah do the brothers say, hey, Ruby, what are you worried about? We sold him to the Ishmaelim. They say nothing. Reuven is crying, saying, where's Yosef? Where's Yosef? Where is Yosef? And nobody says anything. Why? Because like Reuven, the brothers are convinced that Yosef had been attacked by a wild beast and dragged away to his lair and was eaten and killed. And he was no longer there. Now this changes the story. And in my view, makes it a lot more logical. Because now we have a story where Yosef is gone. The brothers who plan to sell him and get rid of him have no idea what happened to him. They have no idea. They never went to the Ishmaelim. They didn't know there were Midyanim behind them who took him out. Their assumption, and it was a logical one, was that in that little time that they were there and Yosef was screaming and yelling, help me, and they weren't listening, that he had been dragged away by a wild animal. And now they had a problem. We're going to go back to Papa. And what are we going to tell him? Oh, we just threw, Joey into the pit and who knows what happened to him. What are they going to tell him? Oh, and we just happened to have his cloak over here. How is Papa going to ever believe that his deliciously perfect favorite son from Rachel is dead? He'll never accept the clear truth that Yosef is gone. He's dead. How do we convince him of that? So they take the cloak, they dip it in blood, and by the way, again, in the text, it tells us that they don't bring the cloak to the father. Look at the thing, Vayishlechu oto. They sent the cloak, the special coat of many colors, if you want to call it that. They sent it through somebody else, through agents, friends. And they're the ones who came to Yaakov and said, Hakerna, do you recognize this? Is this your son's coat? Now, would it make sense for the brothers to ask their father, is this your son's coat? Wouldn't they know what coat it is? They had to ask Yaakov, can you please recognize this coat we've been seeing for 17 years? Is it? And would it make sense for them to say, Hakerna, please, Haktona Bidchahi, is this your son's? And they wouldn't say, is this Yosef's cloak? They thought he was dead. Yaakov didn't know and was being convinced. And that changes the whole story of the entire story of Yosef. No, I wasn't going to give the brothers Shlishi on Yom Kippur for the Aliyah. But they didn't sell him. They thought to kill him too, which is why Chazal is so angry with him. But they never did. And now everything makes more sense. You know the whole story. Oh my goodness. They came down to Egypt and Yosef recognized them, and they never recognized Yosef. Yeah, because he had a beard. Come on, give me a break. Yosef was 6 years younger than Reuven. He was probably half a year, maybe a year younger than the other youngest brother. It was the same age. So because he had a beard, they couldn't recognize him. Okay, it's been 22 years, admittedly. And yes, he was dressed as an Egyptian. I understand that. But, it's like trying to understand how in the world nobody recognized Clark Kent as being Superman because he put glasses on. Give me a break. Well, you didn't recognize him. But if you think he's dead, when you had no idea he was taken to Egypt, that you might find him there in Egypt, come down to get food. Now their inability to recognize Yosef makes total sense. What about Yosef? What is Yosef thinking? When he is pulled out of the pit, what is he thinking? How did they get me here? There for his thought, my brothers probably told them to take me out and sold me. My brothers told them I'm here. They saved my life, but they sold me for a slave. So in Yosef's mind, it was the brothers who sold him. And now he's very frustrated. Isn't anyone going to look for me? I had to spend time as a slave to Potiphar. I had to spend time in a jail in the pit because of a false accusation. Papa, how come he sent me to see my brothers who grabbed me and threw me into a pit? He knew how much they hated me. Why did my father send me? I know he loved me. What is Yosef thinking? My father didn't even bother to look for me. He has all of his wealth and everything. He had flocks all over the place. What do you think? What is it? I mean, did you ever imagine? Here he's living in Hebron, and he told the brothers, his sons, go and see how the flocks are doing up in Shechem. If he's in Hebron, what's he doing in Shechem? There's no grass there. They had flocks. No. He had flocks in the area. He's very wealthy. He had flocks, even, like I said, a good 3-4 day journey from Hebron walking to Shechem. So he had that, and he couldn't send anybody to look for me. My brother sold me to Egypt. Wouldn't they send somebody to find me? So what is Yosef thinking? You see, all the time that we heard the story from so many years ago, we always ask, boy, that Yosef, you couldn't send a nice picture postcard. Hey, being here in Egypt, things are really great here. Never sent anything. Tell Tata that he's fine. And Yosef is saying, what's wrong with my father and my brothers that couldn't come and look for me? Miscommunication. Misunderstanding. The brothers think he's dead. Yaakov thinks he's dead. He says it himself. I'm going to be, they'll bury me mourning for Yosef. And Yosef is saying, they have completely forgotten about me. They've abandoned me. They don't care about me. So what does Yosef going to do? What is Yosef going to do? They don't like me? They're going to abandon me? As I pointed out last week, maybe Yosef says, look, not everybody was going to be part of Bnei Yisrael. I know we were going to be a great nation. We were told that. But Ishmael wasn't part of that nation to Abraham. And Yitzchak said that Esau wouldn't be part of that nation. And maybe, just maybe, we thought all of us would make a nation. Maybe I'm the one who won't be part of that nation, just like Esau wasn't and Ishmael wasn't. I was part of that choosing, and I didn't make it. I picked up the short straw. And if that's the case, I'm going to make it big. I'm going to show them. I'll make a life for myself here in Egypt. Rather wild thing, right? You're making up stories, Winkler. Come on. I'm not. I'm reading the Torah. That's the Torah saying that. How can I say that? Yosef makes it. And Yosef now has a son. What does he call his eldest son? What was it? Yosef's oldest son is Menashe. Why is it Menashe? And the Torah says this. I'm not going to go to the. I promise you, I have it on my sources, but I'm taking my word for it. He says, "Ki nashani Elokim et kol amali." I had a son, and I'm going to thank God because He let me forget all of Amali, the difficult times I had. The et kol beit avi, and help me forget my family. Beit avi. He's thanking God to help him forget his family. And that's how he named his eldest son. I'm having great nachas for my son. I'm going to say, hooray, we forgot about our family. That's exactly how Yosef felt. He has been abandoned. He's not part of the special people, the chosen people. He was unchosen. I'll make it big here. And thank God for helping me at least forget what I went through and let me build another life. That's what he says. That's what the Torah says. Again, I didn't make it up. How else do you understand him calling his eldest son, I'm so happy that you helped me forget my father's house and my family. That's the scenario when they now come to Egypt, as we went through the last 2 weeks. When the brothers come to Egypt, they have no idea Yosef is there. They think he's dead. Yosef thinks they've abandoned me. They don't care about me. Now you understand why he does what he does when they come to see him. He's angry. He's frustrated. Eventually, yes, he tries to make them repair that break. But to understand the proof that we have that this is exactly what they did, you see in the conversations that they had. They had conversations with Yosef, and even thinking that Yosef didn't understand, they also said things that Yosef very well did understand. They said, for example, let me see if I have it over here. Look at number 4 that you now see in front of you. They are talking one to another with Yosef there understanding, but they think he doesn't know Hebrew. And they said to each other, when Shimon was thrown into the pit, they said, "Oh, baby, we got problems here." So they said to each other, Indeed, we are guilty over our brothers, in that we saw his distress when he pleaded with us, and we didn't listen. And that's why this distress has come to us. So let me ask you a question. If they sold him to Egypt, would they not have said, "We are guilty for having seen him, crying out for the pit, that we didn't listen"? Why not say, "We are guilty because we sold him to Egypt as a slave"? They don't say that. They don't say that. And that's when Reuben says, "I told you, you shouldn't have harmed him, and you didn't listen to me." That's why Damo he named the his blood is being demanded as repayment. His blood. What do you mean his blood? His death. You spilled his blood. Now, you didn't spill it, but you caused him to be eaten by that wild animal, and we are guilty for that. Well, he says, you were guilty because I was going to take him out of the pit. And that is why we're suffering now, because we caused our brothers death, because they believed Yosef was dead. And more, they say other things which become very, very clear. And we actually mentioned it when we were talking about the last conversation that Yosef has when he finally breaks down and reveals who he is. That they never say anything that they sold Yosef. In fact, they keep on saying, when they meet Yosef the first time, he says, "Tell me about your family." And he says, "One of the brothers is gone. He's gone. Not one of his job, is an Egyptian or is a slave. He's gone." And then when he comes to Yosef a second time or a third time, when he's been talking to Yosef, he says, "Ve'achiv mate." This is the youngest son called Binyamin, and the father loves him, and he's the only one left from his mother because his brother is dead. Ve'achiv mate. They weren't lying to Yosef. They were telling the truth as far as they knew it. He must be dead. We believed for 22 years that he had been killed by a wild animal. This is what was going on. And the story that we've heard, I'll touch upon why Chazal did this and what was, but that's not the story in the Torah. The brothers weren't that terrible. They were terrible enough. They wanted to kill him, and they almost would have. And they did throw him into a pit. But they did not kill him. And they did not sell him. And they did not lie to their father. They believed he was gone, he was dead, and had to convince the father of that fact, of that truth. And suddenly, everything changes when they see Yosef. When they come to Egypt, they don't know they see Yosef. Yosef knows it. Yosef can play the game now. This is what was truly happening in the real story. Now, yes, there's one or two verses which seem to undermine that. Because when he finally reveals himself, takes off his glasses and his cape is out, and Yosef says, "It's me, it's Yosef, I'm Super Yosef." And he says, "Va'atem al teyatzavu." So don't feel so terrible and don't get so sad. For the Hashem, he says, "Ani Yosef achichem." I'm your brother Yosef. Hashem mechartem oti hena. You sold me to Egypt. Oh, you see, they sold him. But remember what I told you in the beginning? What was Yosef's thought? When he was pulled out by the Midyanim, His assumption is the brothers had said, we got this kid brother over there, he's a pain in the neck, get him out of the pit. And you can pay us, you can take him for a slave. He's believing that they did sell him. He didn't know about, how else would they, Binyanim would know he was there. So Yosef believed he was sold by the brothers, not that he saw them sell him, but he assumed that the Midianites knew he was there because the brothers told them. So that is why he can say Mechartem. He Mechartem otihena. But after the first two times, the next thing we read, next time he says, Asher shalachtem otihena, you sent me here. No longer was you actually sold me here, but you caused me to come down here. Shalach, friends, is it between that Yosef changes his words from Mechartem to Shalachtem. And in between that, it says, Vayidaber, they spoke with each other. So what do you think the brothers and Yosef were talking about? I would suggest, and I have no proof to it, but I think it makes sense, that after the first time he said, you sold me here, he said, Jojo, we didn't sell you. We were going to take you out of the pit. We shouldn't have thrown you there. We were taking you out. When we came back, you were gone. We have no idea what happened to you. We thought you were dead. That's exactly what he finds out, Yosef, at least about the death, when he hears Yehuda say, V'achiv mate, that the brother who is missing is dead. And that suddenly opens up the mind of Yosef to say, oh my God, I was wrong for 22 years. Papa didn't forget about me. He didn't abandon me. I'm part of the future Israelite nation. I haven't been put aside. They thought I was dead. But why? This is Yosef, who when he had to interpret dreams said, Halo lelokim pitronim, God knows it. And when Pharaoh wanted his dreams understood and translated, Yosef says, Elokim matzah. God does it. God. This is Ish Asher Elokimbo. He's a man that had Elokim on his mind, so he realizes it's all from God. Lo atem shlachtem otihena kiyam ha'elokim. He tells the brothers, you were not the ones who caused me to come to Egypt. It was God. It was God. And now he says, it was all part of the plan. Did he know about the promise that God made to Abraham? That the nation would come to be enslaved in a foreign land. Did he know that? I would imagine he did. I'm sure the promise was set down. And now he begins to understand. This, my friends, is what the text tells us. It's a different story from what we learned. And if that's so, what is it all of our coloring books since the second grade showing us how the brothers were pulling Yosef? Why? Chazal were understandably, absolutely, couldn't believe how any brothers would want to kill their brother, that they would send him into a pit. They weren't going to simply let the story go with, they made a mistake, but it's okay. Such a horrific thing. They want you to understand and want for generations to know what a terrible, terrible thing is to hate brothers. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. When you can't talk peacefully to your brother, when you're constantly yelling and screaming and you don't listen to someone else's arguments, you just ignore them. You can't talk to each other, and your brothers, you got trouble here. And Chazal were trying to teach us that. Just as we have certain modern generation that hasn't learned that you fight with brothers and you don't listen and don't discuss with them, but you hate them so much that you will not talk to them peacefully, which is what the Torah says, Lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. Then this is far worse than something that I can say, okay, it just happened, and so forth. They build the story into the text somewhat. They change it here and there, and they look at what to say. It's as if they did sell him. It's as if that was their fault. Yeah, maybe not directly, but it was their fault. If they hadn't thrown him into the pit, he wouldn't have been found. He wouldn't have been sold down. So everything that happened indeed was their fault, and they deserve to be punished for that. That's how Chazal see the story, and everything else works into it. Textually, no. Morally, educationally, oh yes. That, my friends, is the story of Yosef and the brothers. So now you have a fresh look. You have two ways of seeing it. Both are extremely important. But you see now how the lessons of 3,500 years ago can be given today and applicable for us as they are in every generation. Okay? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll know.